The following is a selected video from masterthecontent.com, where you will find an extensive video library of lectures for a variety of standardized admission tests. We offer over 600 hours of detailed video lectures for a multitude of standardized tests. Use our interactive in-lecture table of contents to find specific topics of interest. Work through numerous in-lecture examples to help you internalize concepts. To learn more, visit masterthecontent.com. Your career, our passion.
Where I'm going to start off by reminding you or jogging your memory on a few important taxonomic terms. So taxonomy is basically the science of biological classification. It's the science of defining groups of biological organisms based on the characteristics that they have in common and giving those groups names. Now, nomenclature is a branch of taxonomy that's actually concerned with the assignment of these names, obviously in agreement with published rules. Now, classification on the other hand, is the arrangement of organisms into what we call taxa, or groups, based on mutual similarity or evolutionary relatedness. So what you can think of classification as being is just a way to group organisms or to aggregate organisms into groups that share similar characteristics, or of organisms that have similar characteristics, which makes it easier for us to actually detect or discern the evolutionary relationships between these organisms. Now, what I have on the screen right there is, on the right of the screen right there is a diagram that actually shows you the different taxonomic ranks, and this is in ascending order. So the most basic taxonomic rank that we use in biological classification today is a species, and as you can see, that's the first one we have at the bottom of that diagram right there. After that, we move on to the genus, then the family, the order, the class, the phylum, the kingdom, and finally the domain. Now, that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about a broad class, a broad category of organisms that we call prokaryotes that belong to two separate domains. Like I said, the domain bacteria and the domain archaea. Now, I'll delve into the specifics of that in a few slides. We're just going to finish what we have on here. Now, it's important for you to distinguish what a bacterial species is, and it's important for you to draw a distinction between what your otherwise regular understanding of the term species would be. Now, for people or for taxonomists that are working with higher organisms or more developed organisms that have the capability to sexually produce, you can then define a species as a group of organisms that are able to interbreed, or that have the potential to interbreed exclusively, which allows them to be defined as a species. Now, when we're talking about bacterial cells, they do not have the ability to sexually reproduce. They actually reproduce asexually. So we have to think of bacterial species differently, which leads me to the definition I have on the screen right there of what a bacterial species is. It's basically a collection of strains that share many stable characteristics and differ significantly from other groups or strains. So that's, in a nutshell, a very basic definition of what a bacterial species would be. Now, we need to distinguish what a bacterial species is from a bacterial strain. Now, if you've studied biology even at a very basic level, you've probably come across the term bacterial strains. So what then is a bacterial strain, and how is it different from a bacterial species? So a strain is basically a population of organisms that descend from a single organism or a pure culture. And I want you to note that distinction. When we're talking about a species, we're talking about a group of organisms that share very many or a significant amount of stable characteristics, which defines them or makes them different from other organisms. Now, when we're talking about a strain, we're simply talking about a population of bacteria or a population of organisms that is descendant from a single organism or from a pure culture. Now, there are a few important terms in relation to bacterial strains that I want you guys to take note of. I want you guys to know what a biovar is. A biovar is basically a bacterial strain or bacterial strains that differ biochemically and physiologically. So you can have two biovars with different biochemical and physical or physiological characteristics, which would lead you to classify them in different or as different strains. Now, we also have what we call morphovars. A morphovar is just basically a bacterial strain that differs from another in terms of its morphology. So its morphological characteristics, like its structure, its size, its shape, how it's arranged, how it forms clusters, etc. We're also going to talk about the morphological characteristics of bacteria at length at a later point in this lecture. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about before we move on is another type of bacterial strain called a serovar. Now, a serovar is basically a strain that differs from others in terms of its antigenic properties. So those are a few important terms that it would help you to know as far as bacterial strains are concerned. And what that slide does in a nutshell is that it gives you a very quick snapshot of a few important taxonomic concepts and terms that you need to understand for what we are going to be discussing in the coming slides. So let's move on.